A slanted justice system, high incarceration rates, record unemployment, voter disenfranchisement, racism. These issues are not mutually exclusive from one another. In fact, they're all part of a whole, an ugly reality that exists in this country. So to help me dig in to just some of these issues, I'm joined by the president and CEO of the NAACP, Ben Jealous.
Hey,
thank you so much for taking the time. It's great to have you on.
Yep.
You know, almost a year ago today, Troy Davis was executed in Georgia.
Yes.
You said if you support the death penalty or not, this is a case that people should really think about. What do you think about this case? And I mean, just in light, what do we learn from it?
What we learn from this case is that people who have not committed a crime can be put to death in this country. It was a reminder. Unfortunately, there have been cases before Troy Davis, and there will just mathematically be cases after Troy Davis until we get rid of the death penalty in this country. Today was the last day of his life. Tomorrow would be the one-year anniversary when he was put to death. He was put to death even though the former warden of that very death row said there was too much evidence. I say this, there was too much doubt to execute. Even though the former head of George W. Bush's FBI said there was too much doubt to execute, they still went forward with basically the state's vengeance. And the really sad part is that what that means is that no one can really be sure that the actual killer was ever caught. And that's the trouble with this case.
That is truly a tragedy. I wanted to also just dovetail right into the national conventions. The NAACP had a huge presence there, and I wanted to talk about voter disenfranchisement. There's 13 out of 16 of the states that have these voter disenfranchisement laws are run by Republican governors. What do you think about the effect that this could have in the election? I mean, could this really sway the election? And what is the problem here with racism? I mean, it's really disenfranchising African-American voters.
Yeah, we have seen more states pass more laws pushing more voters out of the ballot box in the past year than we've seen in the past 100 years. You really have to go back to the rise of Jim Crow to find a moment like this. What they've chosen to do is, rather than breaking the law to suppress the vote, they're using the law. And they've done everything from attack same-day signing up to vote, saying you're going to have to go back to signing up weeks before. They've attacked early voting. They've attacked Sunday voting. They've attacked voter registration drives themselves, actually telling our folks in Florida, we will fine you $50 per form if you're more than 2 days late turning in the forms. You have to turn them in within 48 hours. We actually, on the Martin Luther King Day holiday, took them out on a Saturday, brought them back on a Tuesday. Offices were closed Sunday and Monday. The sheriff was waiting for our people, so he was going to throw them in jail and fine them thousands of dollars. We beat that case in court, but it shows you the lengths that they're willing to go. And amidst all of that is strict photo ID. Now, strict photo ID says this tradition in this country of saying just sign your name and if it matches, tell us your address, and if that matches, you can go on and vote, we're going to get rid of. Your utility bill isn't good enough. Your student ID isn't good enough. You need to have a photo ID that's government issued. In Texas, they went so far as to say you could vote with your gun license, but not your student ID. and that's absolutely about the demographics of who are the students and who are the gun owners.
Sure.
And so we've been successful. We're turning the tide, but ground zero right now is Pennsylvania. It's a very big case in court. We're expecting a ruling every day. We're hoping it will turn the tide there too.
Well, let's go straight. You just talked about Troy Davis. Trayvon Martin is something else that really profoundly showed the state, the underlying state of just racism in this country. Yeah. What do you think this really revealed about, here we are, it's kind of something that's under the radar, but it really is pervasive.
This is a problem, and if we're honest, frankly, we see it throughout the West. When I travel to Switzerland or to France, you see young men from North Africa being treated exactly the same way. If you're in London, you see young men from Jamaica being treated the same way. Where basically young men of color are treated as criminals just for being of color. And we have these stand your ground laws in this country, something that you don't see really outside of the U.S., that allows people to racially profile with lethal force while walking down the street. Because what it says is if you fear that somebody's about to do you bodily harm, you can shoot and kill them. Well, there's a lot of folks, unfortunately, who are just afraid of men like me, men of color, simply because of how we look, because we're a little darker, because we have a beard. And it gives them license to racially profile with lethal force, and that's what we're fighting against.
Yeah, indeed. And let's talk about the private prison industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the private industry-industrial complex. Essentially, the highest incarceration are African-American males. Yeah. You could talk about the war on drugs or whatnot, but I mean, essentially what these private prisons are doing is it's slave labor. I mean, do you see the private incarceration facilities as a modern day slavery?
Let's make clear that being duly incarcerated is the loophole to put somebody into slavery in this country. So whether it's a private prison or it's a public prison, that sort of exploitation is certainly possible. What the real issue is that this country has a massive problem with mass incarceration. A white man in this country today is as likely to be incarcerated as a black man in South Africa at the height of apartheid, when South Africa was the world's leading incarcerator. And a black man in this country today is 5 times more likely than either group to be incarcerated. We unfortunately, for the last 30 years, have been trying to solve every social problem, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's mental illness, with incarceration. And what we know is that drug treatment is actually 7 times more effective, for instance, for addicts, than incarceration. And so and that's interesting, because we've actually been getting Republican governors more frequently than Democratic governors to actually stand up with us and say, let's change this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's definitely a very interesting issue. And really quickly to wrap this up, I wanted to get your reaction to this. You know, you had Clint Eastwood representing Obama as that chair, and we see in Texas and Virginia lynchings of a chair.
Right.
I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what Clint Eastwood was doing, but it's pretty clear what these folks are doing, right? Clint Eastwood at least established the chair represents President Obama. And what you see in these photos is people, lynching the president sort of as represented by this chair. Now, what happens when they get confronted is all of a sudden they get real skittish, because they realize that when you're making a threat against the President of the United States, you can find yourself in a federal prison pretty quickly. And so they start backing up and say, oh, I didn't mean anything with it. This was just, this is like a lawn ornament. No, we know what you were doing.
It really does show a lot of underlying issues that need to be addressed. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate the time.